Greetings everyone. In this video we're going to be talking about the Rentals Addendum. This particular addendum is used to accompany a sales contract. Most of the time it is used for the pre-occupancy situation or the post-occupancy. It can also be used for existing tenants or for the seller to be vacating a tenant prior to the new buyer obtaining possession of the property. If you're new to our channel or any of our videos, I'll take a quick second to explain our company. Our company is Nizz Realty Inc. We're licensed at the time of this video in the state of Florida. We cover the entire state of Florida and all 67 counties concerning real estate licensees, realtors, real estate brokers. We pay all of our agents 100% of your real estate commission, so you keep all of your real estate commission. For more information about how our company works and how we pay our agents 100% commission, feel free to visit our website at nizzrealty.com. It's in the description below. If you like any of our videos or find it helpful, please, it only takes a second. It doesn't cost you any money to hit the subscribe button and to hit the notification bell, so you'll be notified for any of our live YouTube sessions, classes, which are completely free to you and anyone else who wants to watch our live classes, and also for additional content like this video and further videos. So please feel free to subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, and also give us a call for a free confidential consultation if you're interested in our brokerage and how it works if you're licensed in the state of Florida. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into today's video. It's a quick addendum. It's only one page. As you can see here, this is everything. So let's go ahead and begin. This is called the Rentals Addendum. I'm sure there's other names for it, unofficial names, but as far as what the FAR bar contract calls it, it's the Rentals Addendum. The first part, you put the seller's name up here. Let's just put a placeholder here. You could really put anything, the company name, whoever owns the property, but let's just say Billy Bob is the seller in this example today. And let's say the buyer is John Doe. Now the property, you put the property address here, so we'll just put a placeholder. And you know, it's a little redundant, it may sound silly, but a lot of times I see realtors, they'll forget to leave out the property address or they'll miss one of the buyer's name. You have to fill out all of these spaces here. Do not leave anything blank. It may sound silly to some individuals, but I see it all the time. Someone doesn't write the property address, or they don't write the city and state. They don't write the zip code. Write the full property address, you know, the home number, the street name, whatever it is, the Ave, Boulevard, the city, full city and state, and the zip code. So with that out of the way, let's move on to the next part. You're going to check one of these boxes down here, either box 1, 2, 3, or 4, whichever applies. You have the sellers and buyers all initial here for this addendum. There's no signing parts here. I'm sure you could put their signatures down here somewhere if you want, but as far as how this is drafted, the way it's seeing in the video, you just put the initials here of the seller and buyers, the parties involved. So let's go over the number 1 paragraph here, the first part. This is for the pre-occupancy agreement. I'd recommend using the pre-occupancy addendum along with this particular addendum you can use. But basically, before you could read through this paragraph, but the pre-occupancy agreement is, to simplify it, the buyer is going to be moving in and taking possession of the property prior to closing. So let's say, for example, your closing is on the 31st of October, but the buyer is going to be moving in to the property on, let's say, the 20th. Now the closing hasn't taken place and the buyer is not the new owner until the 31st, but with a pre-occupancy agreement or a pre-occupancy addendum, the buyer and the seller are mutually agreeing for the buyer to move in on this specific date, in this example, the 20th, and the buyer takes the property in its as-is condition in most situations. And if there's any problems or repairs or anything like that that needs to be done, the buyer assumes all responsibility of that and the seller is completely relieved. So you can read through this paragraph here. I'm just going to briefly explain what the pre-occupancy agreement is. You would check this here. It's basically the buyer moving in before the closing actually happened and taking possession of the property and all responsibility concerning repairs and so on and so forth. You could read through this paragraph for the additional information concerning that, or if you're a part of our brokerage, feel free to reach out. I'll be happy to answer any questions. The post-occupancy agreement, number 2 here, you could click this if the seller and buyer will sign and deliver a written lease containing mutually agreeable terms concerning seller's occupancy. of the property after closing and prepared at seller's expense. Now, the pre-occupancy is for when the buyer is going to move in before the closing. The post-occupancy in most situations is, let's say, like, once again, for example, the closing happened on the 31st, but the seller is still going to be living in the property after closing. Sometimes you use this for, there's many different reasons and examples of why, but one common reason is that maybe the seller is waiting to purchase or move into their new home, and they need a month or two, maybe longer, 4 or 5 months, to still live in the property and until they could move out into their new home. In which case, most situations, you'll do a post-occupancy agreement or addendum, and you could use this addendum here. And then the closing happens, the buyer is now the new owner of the property, and you'll have the seller and buyer, they'll sign up a written lease, and then the previous seller will turn in to the tenant, and the new buyer will turn into the landlord for however long you need, 5 months, 6 months, 12 months. And basically the seller will now have a lease on the property for the lease term, whatever you agree upon, whether it's a few months or up to a year. So that's the point of a post-occupancy addendum. To simplify it, the seller is basically still living in the property. The seller becomes the tenant, becomes a renter, and the new buyer takes over as the owner until the seller moves out. So that's what the post-occupancy agreement is for. Now, the third paragraph here, existing tenant. Let's read through this real quickly. The property is currently used as a rental property, and buyer's rights will be subject to those of existing tenants. Seller will, within blank days, you fill this part in here, 3 days, 5 days, let's say 5 days, after effective date and at seller's expense, deliver to buyer current copies of the rent roll, leases, income and expense statements for the period of, and you write the dates here, as evidence that the property generated income of, you write the amount here, against expenses, and agreements with third parties that will remain in effect after closing. Buyer may terminate this contract by written notice to seller within how many days, 3 days, after effective date if the statements differ maritally from seller's representations. So you could read through the rest of this paragraph, but basically what this is, this paragraph in this particular box here, you're checking for an existing tenant. To simplify it is that the buyer is being made aware that the property is currently leased. There's a tenant there. So what's basically happening is that the buyer is going to be purchasing the property. There is a tenant there that holds a lease on the property and is paying rent. And this particular paragraph is saying the seller is going to deliver all these documents about how much rent they're receiving, the lease contracts, what's the income and expense ratios, what are the bills, how much income is coming in, and they're going to provide all this documentation to the buyer. So let's say, for a quick example, let's say the rent is $2,000 a month, and the bills and upkeep is costing $800 to $1,000 a month. So it shows that there's a net profit of $1,000 each month, and all this documentation will be provided to the buyer before closing. And you can put the dates here and so forth, and then down here you put how many days that you need for the buyer to cancel and terminate the contract if they need 3 days from effective date if they don't like the documentation that's been provided to them. So it's a lot of talking I was doing there. It does require some explanation, but to try to put this in as few words and sentences as possible is that there's a renter in the property. The buyer's buying the property and going to take upon the responsibility of that tenant, the renter. And the buyer is being provided opportunity and documentation to review everything to make sure that everything makes sense, the property is profitable, and they're agreeing to terms that are acceptable to the new buyer. So that's what you do. If there's a tenant in the property, someone renting, you click this here. I'd also recommend there's another addendum you could use. I believe this addendum is pretty good too, and it will suffice if you just want the documentation about the tenant that exists on the property. I would also disclose this in the contract as well, along with this addendum. So that's how you fill out that paragraph number 3. I'd say paragraph number 3 here is one of the main reasons you'll use this rental addendum, is for this third paragraph. You could use it for the paragraph 1 and 2, but there are separate addendums, and you can see in our previous videos for post and pre-occupancy. So number 3 is really good. And number 4, you could use this addendum as well. It's basically that the property is currently used as a rental property, and seller will ensure that the existing tenant vacates the property before the time agreed upon for the walkthrough inspection. So this is another good reason to use this addendum. Is paragraph 4 here. So let's say the buyer is buying the property, the buyer knows there's a tenant in the property, and the seller promised to vacate the tenant before closing. You could use this addendum to check mark paragraph 4 down here, and then I'd suggest writing into the sales contract when the walkthrough date inspection is, so that during the walkthrough inspection, the buyer can visit the property and ensure that the property is completely vacated prior to closing. So that's another good reason to use this particular addendum, is for ensuring the tenant has been vacated. And if the tenant has not been vacated, you have this addendum that shows that it was the seller's responsibility to do so. And if it hasn't been done, then terms need to be renegotiated, or the buyer will proceed to cancel the contract. So that's it for this addendum. Like I said, there are pre and post occupancy addendums that I recommend you use, but you could use this addendum to accompany them. I mainly use this particular addendum for paragraph 3 and paragraph 4, whether you need to vacate and promise vacating a tenant, or there's an existing tenant and you want to be supplied the documentation for its income and so forth. And the lease contracts, of course. So that's pretty much it, a very simple addendum. If you have any questions, you're a part of our brokerage, feel free to reach out, contact me. If you like more questions about our company and how things work, feel free to reach out. Once again, every Thursday we do have a YouTube live class. It's completely free. You don't have to be a part of our brokerage. Anyone in our brokerage, really anyone who can access YouTube can watch our live class, and we go through various different topics, contracts, scenarios, training. It's completely free. Tune in at any time. Feel free to subscribe to our channel. It doesn't cost you a single penny. No money is involved. All you have to do is just click the subscribe button. It's just a small click for you, but it's extremely helpful for our channel, so it'll be greatly appreciated. Feel free to leave comments. I really appreciate the comments that everyone has written on our videos, that it's been helpful. I try to make these videos short and as helpful as possible, so thank you for your kind words. Other than that, if you're interested in our brokerage and you're a realtor in the state of Florida, you want to keep 100% of your real estate commission, we do have a lot of incentives and benefits within our brokerage. Feel free to contact us if you're interested or looking to make a change. If not, then hopefully our videos are helpful for whatever aspect of business that you're doing. Until we meet again, thank you very much and have a good one.